Married people, when did listening to your spouse lead to something completely unexpected? My wife Sarah has this weird habit of talking to strangers everywhere we go. She'll chat with cashiers, people in elevators, random folks waiting in line. I used to find it embarrassing, but after 12 years of marriage, I've learned to just accept it. Last Tuesday at the grocery store, she struck up a conversation with this elderly man in the cereal aisle who seemed confused about which brand to buy. I was getting impatient because we were already running late for my nephew's birthday party, but Sarah kept chatting with him. She was asking about his family and where he lived, the kind of personal questions that would make most people uncomfortable. But this guy seemed grateful for the attention. Turns out his name was Frank, and his wife Dorothy had passed away 6 months ago after 53 years of marriage. She used to do all the shopping, cooking, and household management. He had no idea how to take care of himself and was basically living on frozen dinners and cereal. Sarah immediately invited him over for dinner that Friday night. I thought she was being way too trusting since we literally just met this random stranger in a grocery store, but she insisted he seemed lonely and harmless. She said something about him reminded her of her own grandfather. When Friday came, Frank showed up at our door wearing a pressed shirt and tie, carrying a small wooden box wrapped in tissue paper as a thank you gift. He was so nervous and polite, asking if he should take his shoes off and apologizing for imposing on our evening. During dinner, Frank told us about his 40-year career as a bank manager downtown. The wooden box contained old bank documents, employee photos, and newspaper clippings from the 1960s and 70s. He said looking through these memories helped him feel connected to Dorothy since she used to organize all their keepsakes. As he was showing us the pictures, pointing out coworkers and explaining different bank policies from decades ago, I noticed one black and white photo that made me freeze. There was a young construction worker in overalls and a hard hat who looked exactly like my father. I asked Frank about the photo and he got excited. He remembered that construction project perfectly because there had been a serious scaffolding accident during the bank renovation in 1967. A support beam had given way and Frank was trapped underneath. A construction worker had risked his own safety to pull Frank out before the rest of the structure collapsed. Frank never got the chance to properly thank the man who saved his life. He only knew his first name was Robert, and he worked for Henderson Construction Company. Frank had been carrying guilt about this for over 50 years, wondering what happened to his hero. I pulled out my phone and showed Frank a picture of my dad from around that same time period. Frank's hands started shaking as he stared at the photo. He was absolutely certain this was the man who had saved him. My father's name was Robert Henderson, and he had owned Henderson Construction. The crazy part is my dad passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack, and Frank had no way of knowing. When I told him, Frank started crying and said he had been praying for decades that he would somehow find Robert again to thank him properly. Frank opened his wallet and pulled out a yellowed business card he had kept for 60 years with my father's company name and phone number written in pencil. He had been carrying it all this time, hoping to run into my dad again someday or track him down through the phone book. We spent the rest of the evening looking through Frank's photo collection. He had dozens of stories about the bank construction project and remembered my dad as being incredibly kind and hardworking. Frank said my father would always share his lunch with coworkers who forgot to bring food and stayed late to help anyone who was struggling with their tasks. Now Frank comes over for dinner every Wednesday night. He brings photo albums and tells us stories about my dad from back when they were both young men starting their careers. I've learned more about my father's character and work ethic in these past few months than I had discovered in 30 years of being his son. Last week, Frank showed us a newspaper clipping about the scaffolding accident that he had saved all these years. The headline read, "Local Hero Saves Bank Manager," and there was my dad's name in the article. Frank had kept it as proof that angels exist in ordinary people. If Sarah hadn't talked to a random stranger in the cereal aisle that Tuesday afternoon, I never would have met the man whose life my dad saved 60 years ago. Sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when you least expect